This is the end, the wrap up on the fasting event. I see we have several people who are waiting and ready. Thank you for joining us. So I wanted to cover a couple of items before we got started. Um, First of all, I've gotten a lot of interest in these activities, a lot of positive feedback. I did go ahead and set a time slot for a weekly review, a weekly YouTube live event. I'm enjoying them too because it's great. It's like being able to talk with a patient or a group of attendees at a seminar about this specific stuff. So, when you're just talking and no responding, you head out down your own bunny trails, and I am certainly the world's worst. Maybe not the world's worst, but I'm pretty bad at heading down a bunny trail. Um, so I'm going to be doing this every week for the first month or so. It's going to be Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Now, I know you guys in Alaska said 9 p.m. was perfect for you, and I understand that. I may be able to switch to 9 p.m. in a month or two. But here's the reason. It's a family thing. And the family thing is this. My daughter's coming home from Peru. She's been there doing some public health work, pediatric anemia, and now access to food in urban food desert kind of areas. She's coming home for a few weeks, and I want to be available to see her. I just noticed from looking at the screen there that I'm getting what I often get. The color's not so good. As I've said before many times, the video, the graphics are my downfall, one of my Achilles heels. It's because I use a webcam, and I got some comments about that, and just like everything else in the video area, I'm working on it, but that's not my background. My background is preventive medicine, and that just gives me another segue into why am I doing this event. It's because I've spent most of my career being a career medical director. I've been the chief medical officer for groups with 500 docs, with a place called Premise, which it had about 500 clinics for the Fortune 500 and some other large employers across the country. When I left, it's about 1,000 now. So, maybe I was holding back their growth. I used to work for Toyota, the U.S. I was medical director for the U.S. Section of Toyota. Chief medical officer for MDLIVE. There's about 800 docs doing online telemedicine, mostly urgent care though. And most recently, the chief science officer for Physician Partners. It's a group that's doing great work in Medicare Advantage. Speaking of Medicare Advantage, a lot of my folks are either at Medicare age or getting there. And many people think that Medicare Advantage is maybe not the highest quality, not what you want to get if you can afford it. That's changing rapidly. The processes set up within Medicare Advantage are actually working. So I can't help but make a plug for that. I'm still consulting with Physician Partners, although I left full-time to concentrate on providing this information for free at the YouTube channel. I'm also consulting with another Medicare Advantage group and a third group called K-Health. K-Health is I've done a couple of videos on it. It's like bringing a IBM Deep Blue into doctor telemedicine diagnostic processes. And again, that's a fascinating area. It's something that's always been near and dear to my heart, but I'm not going to focus on that. I just want to give you a little bit of background. Why am I doing this event? because people tend to do very well with weight loss. Or more and more people are beginning to learn how to lose 30 pounds and more. I've had dozens of patients do it. The same pattern is very popular, and I see it over and over again. First, they decrease their glucose swings. That's a blood glucose, by the way. Again, my visuals are not that great. They decrease their blood glucose swings, going low carb. And then after that, they tend to close their time window. It's called time-restricted eating, or a TRD, time-restricted diet. Now, most people call this an intermittent fasting. Technically, it's not really intermittent fasting, because intermittent fasting is more like the 5-2 diet, where you diet 2 days and then eat what you normally do 5 days per week. So that's, but here's the thing. Despite losing all that weight, I get very few people take me up on my suggestion for long-term fasting. They say, I've lost the weight. Why do I need to do long-term fasting? And that's really not so much the question. The real question is, that's not fine. I don't want to not eat for day after day after day. I understand that. I come from a family where my dad was my height and north of 350 pounds. My mom was significantly overweight for a while. Most of the members of my family have been significantly overweight. I'm 150 now. I was 155, by the way, a couple of weeks ago. So I expect to gain some of that back from the past 7 days. People don't understand that there are easy transitions. The fasting mimicking diet, and there's a lot of versions. There's a lot of do-it-yourself versions out there. There's even low-carb versions, which I think I'm going to try next time, because as you saw, if you've seen any of these videos or saw during the week, I had some significant spikes, even with just the quote low glycemic complex carbs in the soups that are in the Prolon material. Prolon is the manufactured for sale version. Again, designed by Walter Longo, great researcher in this area. So the original reason for designing the fasting mimicking diet is in the words, fasting mimicking. It's not really fasting, but it is mimicking it, at least biochemically, and it has a lot of the very same positive effects, but it's easy. It decreases mTOR and supposedly decreases, well, it actually does decrease insulin resistance. I don't know if it's a permanent thing. It doesn't make you grow your pancreas back or your beta cells, or I don't think it permanently changes your insulin receptors in your muscle cells and liver cells, but that still remains to be seen. There's actually great evidence that it has a very positive impact there. And doing all those things does decrease plaque deposition. So just a couple of other things, and then we'll get to we'll get to some of the questions. I ended the fast today. Everything. So what happened was, on the FMD on Friday and Saturday, days 4 and 5, I usually feel bad. Last FMD Prolon I did was a couple of years ago, and I've done what, 3 or 4, maybe half a dozen, and I always felt really bad at days 4 and 5, and I figured I'd want to eat on Sunday when it was over. I really didn't. It was really easy this time, and I was really not hungry and did have plenty of energy. So here's what I did, and I'm not recommending that anybody do this. I did see a couple of comments that folks are considering that. I said, you know what? I've always wanted to do a full 7-day fast. I go through the 2 days that are really rough and then don't go any further. And then I thought, well, you know what? fasting mimicking diet is an easy button for fasting, and why don't I just go ahead? I usually do my weekly fast at water fast on Monday and Tuesday. I finished my FMD on Saturday, and if I had not planned to do that following week, this today and tomorrow as a water fast, but I said, why don't I just skip eating on Sunday, continue more of a water fast on Sunday and Monday, and then that'll be a full 7 days. It will not be anything near a full 7-day water fast, but it's a full 7 days of significant fasting, with the last 2 days being water fast. I felt great. The key to feeling great when you're fasting is sleep. And for most people don't sleep well when they're fasting. I am included. I usually don't sleep well at all when I'm fasting. Here's what happened though. At day 3.5, I was feeling kind of not so good the first 2.5 days, not 3.5, but 2.5 days. I took about a 10-minute nap on noon of, what was that? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The rest of Thursday, I felt great. I slept well Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And I felt great through the whole time. The one glitch that I had was, and I shared that this morning in a live discussion, I woke up with a blood sugar in the 40s, high 40s, mid 40s. At first, I didn't believe that. I felt great. And so 40s is not something you want to mess around with. You need to be concerned and make sure that you're not getting ready to pass out or something. So again, I felt great. I knew that I knew that my body was accommodating and learning and hardening to lower glucose levels. That's happened before as I watched my continuous glucose monitor. So the next thing I did was I checked my blood glucose with a finger stick, and sure enough, it was in the mid 40s. So I went down. I had what I usually have in the mornings. It's a bulletproof coffee. Some people had not heard about that. I'm still spiking because I had a great dinner. Janice and I went out, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Let me finish what happened this morning. So I realized that I had taken metformin the night before. Did it totally by mistake. Should not take metformin while you're fasting, especially day 6 of a fast. And I've screwed up before. I'm sure I'll screw up again. Again, I felt great. Had the bulletproof coffee, so it did have some calories in it. It has a half teaspoon of coconut oil, half teaspoon of ghee in it, and some of that almost orange-looking ghee that may have significant K2 in it, made from grass-fed calves or cattle. Sat down for about an hour or so waiting for the event, and then felt fine. My blood sugars were back up in the 60s, and my blood sugars are in the 60s a lot these days. So then it came on up. Never really got much above 60 during the day. Maybe 60s and 70s, you see, right? That's about between 60 and 80 right there. And that's where it stayed until I started refeeding. And again, I had a little bit of a spike tonight. I celebrated, and we don't like using the word cheated. We like using the word vacation. I took a carb vacation, had some, actually even had some, had a steak, an 8-ounce steak, a glass of dry white wine, and here was the bad part. I had some potatoes. And so I came home, the spike started up, and I went for a walk. Because it was potatoes and not that soup, you're not able to see that very well. Because it was potatoes and not that soup, I may need to go for another walk. It looks like it's starting to go back up a little bit. But again, 125, 130 are not big issues. Just to share with you what happened over the the week during those 2 days of water fasting. And let me clarify before I go on. Significant clarification. These were technically not water fasting days. These were what's called a fat fast. Why? Because there are calories and fat in that bulletproof coffee that I just described to you, and I had that both days. So as you see, these blood sugars. This was on Sunday, I believe. Oh heck, Sunday, staying way below the bottom of that green space. Gosh, I don't know why we're getting so much reflection tonight. There you go. Maybe you can see it better that way. I'm just getting a lot of reflection tonight. I'm not sure why it's coming through. Here we go. That's a little better. That green space there is the bottom of it is 80. So here's the uh, Saturday was also remained low. Here's the two spikes that I tended to get each day with the fasting mimicking diet soup. It's like every day. And those spikes actually are far bigger than I get, except when I go on a carb vacation. Again, just over and over. On I think it was day 2 or day 3, I had a spike up to almost 200 on mushroom soup. So again, significant learning experience here. That's a typical day for me when I'm feeding, not on a fasting diet, and not eating carbs. And again, most of my days are like that. As you see, at this time period between midnight and 4 in the morning, I tend to go down in that bottom to actually just below 50. So during that time period, my blood sugar is hitting the 50s and slightly below quite a bit of times. So that's probably why I hit below 50 again, and that's right at 6 p.m. and at 3 p.m. Excuse me, 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. went below 50 there as well. So that's probably why I felt fine, even though I had a sugar in the 40s. Now, while I was in the midst of that asymptomatic hypoglycemic episode, my CGM ran out, and I didn't have a new one. CGM means continuous glucose monitoring. A lot of people are getting a lot of information about that, and again, seeing how useful that is to me in terms of managing my blood glucose. Again, why do I manage my blood glucose that way? Because elevated blood glucose and elevated insulin are the most common reasons for developing plaque, which is the problem, the underlying mechanism behind having heart attacks, strokes, and all the other things that the number one killer, the number one disabler, and a whole bunch of other stuff like blindness and dementia and a few other things. So it turns out that there are 80 million Americans minimum that have insulin resistance, like I do. In other words, they don't digest carbs very well. And that increases dramatically as you age beyond 60. The 80 million is a number from the CDC, and I think that's low. The other number that they say is that 72 million of those folks do not know. They have no clue that this process is going on in them. And they're burning their arteries, just like that analogy of frogs getting slowly boiled in water. And we think that we can't prevent heart attack and stroke. Not true. So anyhow, my CGM monitor, continuous glucose monitor, blew out right when I was getting beyond. My blood sugar had gotten back up to the 60s, but I still obviously wanted to watch it the rest of the day. I did get a new one, and that's where you were seeing now. That's why you saw that gap between this morning and this afternoon. One final item before I get to comments. I see we've got a lot of folks on and a lot of comments. I'd like to deal with some of those. We're going to have an event in Louisville on November 8th and 9th. It's going to be at the University of Louisville Speaking Center. It'll be 2 days. We're doing it based on the great feedback we got from the Healthy Life Summit in Orlando. Um, It'll be, I think, a little bit less than 1,500, basically, to come to those 2 days, get a CIMT, and learn a lot about what we do. Um, and a little bit less than 3,000 to, if you decide, you know what, I'd like to come get all my labs done beforehand and actually spend 2 days learning about my labs, my CIMT, and my condition, and actually get an evaluation as part of it. Um, It'll be, again, different from the Healthy Life Summit in Orlando. There were several other speakers there. There were a couple of financial guys. There was a great dentist, Doug Thompson, who formed the Wellness Dentistry Network. He's been on several of my videos. Um, and David Mintz, a nutritionist. Now, this is just going to be us. It's going to be, for the 2 days, about 80%, well, maybe 70% me. And the rest of it's going to be Janice and a lot of audience participation kind of things, with a couple of formalized patient panel type things. So patients, again, we'll be talking about the stuff that I do, the stuff that I talk about on the videos: cardiovascular inflammation, insulin resistance, LP little a, strokes, atrial fib, and how to prevent those things. And folks that have had all of those things and are working on it will also be there sharing. I've got a couple of people already that have signed up. So be aware, we're going to start getting some more information out. All we have is just to save the date right now. So that's it for prepped stuff. Let me go back and respond to some comments. Joey Boombox, hello to you, and to you as well, Steve Sapel. Richard Lunn, 6 p.m. works here in LA. Good, great, glad to hear it. I'm going to test my webcam setup to see if I can stabilize the color. That would be helpful. Again, you know what I need? Maybe I don't think I mentioned a minute ago, I keep meaning to get a real camera. I don't have one of those. I do think that a real camera gets rid of that color change, but that's just yet another major hassle. And as you guys can tell, I demonstrate it just about every day. I am not a videographer. Like the live broadcasts, thanks. I do too. It's great to be able to interact. Your excellent knowledge is what we are seeking. Thanks for sharing. Thank you for your interest and the comment. I appreciate it. Bart Robinson, how you doing tonight? Terry Wyatt. I agree, Terry. Very informative man, and I'm learning a lot. Thanks again. I appreciate the interest. Michelle Curley, good to see you looking revived and renewed. And you seem to be clearing your throat a little, if at all. Have you noticed? Yeah, one thing I have noticed is I get tired. There are two things that really tend to get me started on clearing my throat. One is as I get tired, and I don't know what that is. The other is during allergy seasons. I've got significant allergies. I got those from my mom, just like I got atrial fib gene from my mom. I have no problems fasting anymore. After the first few times, it gets easier. Absolutely no question. For people that fast, that's really good. For people that are on insulin, it's a little bit scary. You know, you hear a lot of things about, and it's dangerous. You know, you hear a lot of things about the dangers of hypoglycemic episodes. Here's where the problem comes in. It's usually not that big of a deal for people that are not on medications that lower your blood sugar. But if you're on insulin and you get hypoglycemic and you don't notice it, even though you're down in the 40s, I mean, you can drop a little bit lower, which is very significant, and have a problem. What's even a bigger issue is the big challenges, the big danger with hypoglycemic episodes is operating machinery, falling downstairs, interacting with your world in an impaired fashion. Just like alcohol, driving with alcohol. Alcohol, by the way, is a double whammy. Not only does alcohol impair the brain from the alcohol itself, it also can lower your blood sugar. So, being the main cook and bottle washer at my house, I love fasting days. Oh, well, if you've got everybody else fasting, that sounds like a good deal. Can you describe the soups, especially the minestrone? Does it have pasta? I don't think the minestrone had pasta. And oh gosh, that box is it's not where I can go get it. The soups were minestrones, tomato soup, and that mushroom soup. I think maybe fortunately for me that mushroom soup was there was only one of those. There was two of each of the others, maybe three. The minestrone had some peas in it as well. They're powdered soup for the most part. Um, the mushroom soup had some little bitty particles of mushroom, and the minestrone had some whole peas in it, but the rest of it's just a powder. You pour it into hot water. Powdered soups don't sound good, but they really did taste good. And you know what they say, hunger is the best sauce. I don't think it's just hunger. These foods taste good. There have been other competitors, proprietary competitor products for fasting mimicking diet, like Lifebox, which I tried, and eh, it was a lot less expensive, but the food wasn't as good. Lifebox is, I've tried looking it up recently. I can't. I think it's defunct. Um, the uh, the soups each had about, I think, 22, 23 grams of carbohydrates in them. Only 1 or 2 grams of sugar. So again, it was mostly complex carbs. Now, and as you can see, that's I've got significant insulin resistance. My body's not going to handle even a soup with 23 carbs in it. Complex carbs, not glycemic carbs. Okay, David Jones, you need to read some newer studies. Brand new beta cells being generated as a result of fasting T cells. I will attach the link later. I attached the site a while back, newest papers. Very interesting, David, and I'm glad you brought that up. And you're probably right. Um, I still, however, do not think that even a dozen episodes of fasting mimicking diet is going to um, regrow all your beta cells or change the underlying, or I'm sure it'll improve it. There's no question about that. The research has shown it. Is it going to cure it? I don't think so. But again, I do look forward to seeing your links on that. By the way, let me clarify: I am not being critical of the fasting mimicking diet or fasting at all in terms of insulin resistance. That's the major reason that I'm doing it. It does stimulate stem cell activity when you start refeeding. So now that I started refeeding tonight, I'm over the next day or two, or more, I'm going to start getting a lot more stem cells coming in and replacing beat up body parts. Lucien P, Dr. Brewer, good to see you, Lucien. Dr. Brewer, how does chana dal influence your blood sugar? I read it's the single best food for prediabetes in GI. I don't know what chana dal is. Send me some stuff on it. I'd really appreciate it. Michelle Curley being forewarned of low blood sugar. Oh gosh, something just happened and I'm sorry. Oh, being forewarned of low blood sugar symptoms is essential. I hit 53 one morning. It spiraled into a panic attack and a trip to the ER. Ended up rather embarrassed. Live and learn. Well, interesting point, Michelle. I've got a couple of old videos from 2 years ago. Obviously, with my insulin resistance, I was cranking along at much higher blood sugar levels, and my body was not used to these lower levels. The first hypoglycemic episode I had was in the 60s. But I felt all the symptoms, panicky, a lot of adrenaline going off, not being able to move very well or think very well. I was in a dangerous situation there in terms of one time that happened after I'd been bike riding, and I needed to drive home. So we got some carbs and got me rolling again. One thing I want to say while I'm thinking about that is um, one of the next most common mistakes after you get into a symptomatic hypoglycemia and you need to treat it is overreacting to it. As you saw this morning, all I did was add a little bit of that bulletproof coffee. Um, Again, only the half teaspoon of coconut oil, the half teaspoon of ghee. Didn't load up on the carbs. Quite often, people will notice they have hypoglycemia. The epinephrine will start going. They'll panic and they'll just load up on glycemic carbs. Now, if you're in a significant dangerous area with and you're taking insulin, maybe that's not that bad. But somebody like me, type 2 or insulin resistant, it just usually not necessary, and it wasn't necessary. Elaine Louise, I come in peace. I'm glad to hear that. I do too. Mr. Garber, ho. Buster C, hello, Doc, from Atlanta. Good to see you. Garber, how soon can we the commoners buy these? I'm not sure what you're talking about, Mr. Garber. If you're talking about the Freestyle Libre, you can get those. You need a prescription, and Michelle and I are developing a service. There are a couple of people that have said, I'd like to take metformin, but my doc doesn't want to do it. Do you do it? I've reopened my practice and in my retirement, and I have licenses in about 40 states. So we've developed a service where we'll provide metformin scripts, and we also we'll develop a service where we provide the CGM, continuous glucose monitoring. Now, your insurance is probably not going to pay for it if you've got the low levels of insulin resistance. They're only going to pay for it if you've got documented type 2 diabetes. But like I said, in many ways, that's too late. You need to be dealing with this when you first discover it, and you need to be looking for it. Unfortunately, long before most doctors do. Jim Maley, how about a video on the prostate? I've sort of touched on the prostate a couple of times. I touched, for example, on a video regarding prostatic hypertrophy and metformin. Metformin actually decreases prostatic hypertrophy, and it appears that it has to do with insulin IGF, insulin-like growth factor. That's one of the things that both metformin and fasting do. They decrease insulin-like growth factor and several other things. They improve autophagy and some of that. But I'm not a prostate guy. Don't have a lot of background or expertise in the area, so that's probably about as deep as I'm going to get into prostates. Will my insurance pay for this? Pay for what? Your insurance? We don't take insurance. Insurance companies are very good at bringing you back to the standards of medicine. And if you want the standards of medicine, you stay, you see a doc that practices the standards of medicine, and the standards really aren't good enough right now for detecting early insulin resistance. Sometimes they'll pay for some of the labs, but that becomes a problem as well. Here's why. Labs realize if the insurance company pays you pays for half of the labs but doesn't pay for the rest, now there's nobody standing between the lab and you. They charge you 2, 3, 4, and 5 times what they would the insurance company, or even me, like the doc, for the remainder of those labs. So you end up worse off trying to get half your labs paid for by insurance. In some, we used to do what we call cash pay, where we would negotiate the lab prices for everybody. Now the labs have actually become far more reasonable, and we don't do that so much. We do that in special cases. We've got a couple of cases going on right now where we're doing cash labs. Mike Smallridge, no, that was Mike Smallridge. Thank you, Mike. Richard Lund again. Let me work on the camera issue. Thanks. I think, Richard, you were the guy that noticed it originally. Again, please at least confirm that if I get a real camera that maybe it'll fix that problem. CC, can a person have early insulin resistance without pancreas or beta cell damage? Actually, that's exactly what happens. It's not usually originally a pancreas or beta cell problem. It's usually a problem. Well, we don't completely understand it, but it appears to start off as a problem with the insulin receptors in the cell wall of the muscle and liver. Could insulin resistant people get trim and healthy to the point where their sugar doesn't spike? Well, here's the thing. Fat mass impacts your hormones to a large extent, and having a high basal insulin impacts this process as well, because it of several different things. There are things called adipokines and some other technical words. Basically, what they do is they slow fat burning. They tend, actually, if you read, there's a bunch of books out there about it. Many of them have been written by Gary Taubes. One of them is Why We Get Fat and What to Do About It. And the point behind most of those is the hormonal theory of getting of weight gain. And then that theory is that it's not that you're getting fat because you're eating more. It's you're eating more because you're getting fat, and you're getting fat because you're getting insulin resistant. As you know, you get that middle age spread, you also get insulin resistance during your middle ages. James Uber, hi. Hello, how are you, James? Bill Cockrell, is keto safe for those with no gallbladder and high cholesterol? Well, I haven't seen any reasons why it's not. You get into a lot of definitions of keto and carnivore and all that. And I still, for a large part, tend to, I'm not totally plant-based keto anymore. I used to be. I'm getting much more animal products. And it's after I did some of the more recent videos on TMAO. That's one of the final remaining planks in the vegans platform, other than ethics and animal ethics. And I don't get into that piece. TMAO does appear to be a significant heart attack risk factor, but as you get deeper into the research, right now it appears that TMAO seems to be much more of a risk for people that already have some kidney failure than people that do not. The research is not entirely open on that yet. Soups and salt thoughts. Not sure what that means, Gerard Cook, but thanks. I mean, maybe if you can clarify it. 147 degrees west. Thank you, Doc. That may be my friend in Alaska. If so, thank you. Okay, Mendoza mentions China Doll on our website, Mendoza.com. Okay, we'll have to take a look. Thank you. Steve Sapel, Doc, do you think that the preservatives in food that we are all exposed to affect IR and burn arterial walls? Stephen, I don't know. It may have been you that mentioned chlorine as well today. I don't know. I haven't seen the information, the research on that. But as you or somebody else mentioned in the chlorine post, I'm a good example. And I'm not the only one. I have plenty of metabolic doppelgangers out there who have remained thin. My BMI's what? I'm 5'10", 150 now. Clearly low 20s. It's always been in the low 20s, and yet I got significant insulin resistance. And we're not talking about low 20s like 24 or 23. It's probably 21. I doubt it's 22 anymore. but that's usually my range. And even though I stay that way, and I have done a ton of very, I'm not a world class athlete. I'm not that competitive at all, but I try a lot and I have fun doing it. Um, do a lot of athletics. Have done half a dozen marathons, an ultra marathon. I've done mostly long, slow distance though, and that is not as good for this process, this issue, as high intensity interval training and resistance training, which I didn't do. I did intervals, obviously, playing full court basketball for hours, but I didn't do a lot of resistance training until the past few years. Okay, so Richard Lund says, let's hold on camera purchase until we can see the whole process. Thank you very much. I would. The other reason I'm still holding on it because I just got so much stuff. I've got one of the busiest retirements I've seen, but I'm also having a blast. This is a legacy thing for me. I enjoy helping people get healthy. David Jones, the brain being a big consumer of glucose is really scary looking at patient scan of diabetic brain glucose uptake. Not exactly sure what you're talking about, but yeah. They have type 1 diabetes where that one does appear to be a primary injury to the pancreas and beta cells. Then you've got type 2, which you see more in people that are older, and it's increased in people that have obesity, have a lot of fat mass. But have you heard of type 3? Type 3 is dementia is now being called, Alzheimer's dementia is now being called type 3. Insulin is actually an integral part to making memory, the biochemistry of making memory in your brain cells. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, and yes, it's very scary. When I did the Alzheimer's training with Bredesen, Dale Bredesen, he came up and asked me what I thought about the training afterwards, and I said, "Well, I was surprised that you didn't spend that much time on insulin resistance." He said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, I thought at a bare minimum, at least 50% of dementia is associated with insulin resistance." He looked at me kind of funny and he said, "I think maybe 100% of it is due to insulin resistance. Even if you can't detect it in your body, there appears to be a phenomenon called insulin resistance of the central nervous system or brain, which is very much related to this." So Gerard Cook, is salt an issue? Is salt an issue or a problem? You're probably asking about it because you've seen it a lot. There's a lot of debate out there. People that are on low carb diets, fasting diets, tend to focus on salt not being a problem. I don't really even encourage it. I don't know. I don't know that I don't encourage it, but I don't focus on salt a lot. If you look on a population basis, and there's tons of salt in a population's diet, their blood pressure will be significantly higher. Does that mean if you're doing fasting and low carbs and some of those things that you should really focus on your salt? I doubt it. 147 degrees west, I lost 97 pounds on keto. And congratulations, that's impressive. And that was after I had my gallbladder out. After my gallbladder surgery, they put me in this low fat, high fruit, bread heavy diet. I gained a huge amount of weight, lost again on keto. Well, I'm glad you lost it again. I think that's what you're saying. And sorry about the weight gain. Yes, I am Alaskan, along with the TAPS. I'm not sure what the TAPS means, but we actually traveled to Alaska once. I talked to a friend and patient today who has not been. I told him to add it to his bucket list. Alaska is another world. It is incredible. Babak Ganjavian, hi doc, can you talk a little about ApoE and Alzheimer's risk? Do we just order ApoE profile for risk factors? Is ApoE4 higher risk? Yes, ApoE4 has clearly been related with a higher risk for dementia. Um, should you order one? I mean, that's your decision. A lot of patients that I have don't want to know that. Um, Here's part of the problem with ApoE4. Up until a few years ago, the common knowledge was that you don't really add. You really watch your fats on ApoE4. Um, Bredesen and a lot of others are leaning and focusing on getting more mildly ketotic on an ongoing basis, and that's what I do with our Bredesen dementia patients. Try to get them mildly ketotic, and that's where I try to stay as well. Um, Here's the thing: how are you going to get mildly ketotic if you're uh, consistently low fat? So when you start weighing the two, the question is, um, which is more has more risk: eating the fat if you've got ApoE4, or um, not being ketotic. And again, I think that's the big question. A lot of us are leaning more towards saying, look, eating the fats very well may be less risk uh, than trying to maybe eating not being ketotic is more risk than the fat. Have a few others. Do you think anything can be done to delay the onset? Um, I'm not quite so worried about delaying the onset. I would love to do that uh, in an otherwise already healthy person. But let me tell you again, if you've got 30 pounds too much body fat, that's clearly making you get insulin resistant 5, 10, 15, 20 years too early. So yes, if you're not at peak body composition, peak lifestyle, you are getting it early whenever you got it. So yes, the vast majority of people can clearly delay the onset of that insulin resistance. And when they get it, the majority of people can manage it mostly with lifestyle. There's been research looking at things like metformin. Even mild management of your lifestyle was 3 times more effective than drugs, metformin. And let me tell you, those of you who think you're going to supplement your way out of bad health, again, you can't supplement or medicate your way out of an unhealthy lifestyle. Oh, TAP is Trans-Alaska Pipeline. Thanks. I would never have gotten that. David Jones, sorry, I meant PET scan of glucose uptake in the brain. Diabetics look like TBI victims. Yeah, they do. That's a problem. And those folks often, again, go on to start developing cognition problems. Hi, doc. Thanks to you, I got tested. 118 coronary score. Depends on how old you are. That's not too bad. Now on low dose Crestor. Good choice. Diabetes in my family, so making changes. Good. I'm not overweight, but do need to get more exercise. Cardio or weights? I've got a video on HIIT, and it's pretty definitive. It was done at Mayo, I think Mayo Rochester, um, and they even did muscle biopsies on this one. So it was like 20 and 30-year-olds, 50 and 60-year-olds, and like 80-year-olds. And they had enough to bunch them into 3 different groups. One group did long, slow distance. Another group did high intensity intervals. And the third group did resistance training. By far, the best improvement in mitochondria was HIT, high intensity interval training. And some of these people, again, were 80 years old. And they had the best improvement. Some of the 80-year-olds doubled their mitochondria. Now, does that mean that that's like an automatic cure for insulin resistance? No, I mean, there's some hoops you got to jump through there. But weight training is good, but clearly HIAT was the best weight training, and then the long, slow distance. And that's part of the reason I think why you see these long distance runners like me go on to develop insulin resistance, even though they may be thin as a rail. Thamori 54. I have no idea what 54 means. Again, gotten some great interest, some great reception. I really appreciate the interest that you guys have shown tonight. We're done with the questions and comments, so I'm going to wrap up. Thanks. Good night.